All right. Okay. So, welcome everybody to week 4 of our leadership conversations. And I am going to let my guest introduce himself. So, who are you and who do you lead?
My name is Cameron Andry, and I have a few different leadership roles. From a career perspective, I'm the men's and women's golf coach at Taylor University. So I have about 20 student athletes who are under my guidance. And then I'm also a dad with two little ones, and Nora is 5 and Graham turns 4 this weekend. So um, yeah, I have a leadership role at home as well.
Yeah. Um, okay. So, when did you first? I've asked everybody this question in this series because I just find that some people knew early on that they were a leader, and some people kind of had a moment or a slow evolution of realizing, wait a second, I didn't, people are looking to me. So for you, when did you realize you were a leader?
Yeah, I've thought about this question, and I think in the fourth grade, I had a teacher, Mrs. Combs, and I was at that point like a pretty quiet, a little bit shy, and she just told me like, I see something in you. I think you have the potential to be a leader, and she kind of made me like see myself in a way that I had never saw myself, and she really pushed me to be in um, like some of the accelerated classes. And honestly, it sounds so strange. I mean, I was 10 years old, but my self-confidence grew so much throughout that year just because of the way that she saw me. And so I feel like I began playing organized sports like right about that same time. And I kind of took that, like the idea of being a leader on my team among my peers. And that just kind of carried over. And then I got hired to be the coach, the golf coach at Taylor, when I was 24. And so like my senior players, I was barely a year or two older than them. And they're looking at me like, well, coach, what do we do? And I don't know. And so I've kind of had to, learn the hard way on some things, but I think Mrs. Combs really just saw like some leadership potential in me and helped me to see it in myself.
That's awesome. And just if anybody didn't watch or hear last week's leadership conversation, I was talking with Ross and Mackenzie Braun, who are in the education system, and the fact that they are like calling out leadership in students and raising the next generation of leaders. And so I think that's cool to like see the evidence of that in you. So that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So, okay, you lead a team of athletes. You're recruiting. I'm sure you're leading your staff or your team of people. And see, I'm not a sports person, so I'm like your group that you hang with and do business and all that with. Um, and then you're leading at home, and you're leading just as a mentor to these athletes. What's your biggest challenge, would you say?
Well, I think there are a couple of challenges that come to mind right away. One is, I think, a challenge that probably a lot of people can relate to, and that is the balance of work and family. My job, like a coach, it's kind of like all consuming. I mean, there's never a time when you're really like off the clock. You might get a text message from a player who's having in their mind an existential crisis at any given time, and so you've kind of got to be ready to go deal with that. And I travel a lot with both my teams, and so that means that I'm away from home a lot, and I'm putting a lot on my wife Jessie to be a single parent at different points in time throughout the year. And so that finding that balance and being I feel like I I had a mentor of mine who said, you need to be where you are. And so like when you are at practice with your team, you can't be thinking about what you need to do, in the office. And when you're at home with your family, you can't be thinking about the kid you need to recruit. And you've just got to be present where you are. And so I certainly am not perfect at that, but I really try. Um, and then, I think from a coaching perspective, I'm super competitive. And so I love to win, and finding the balance. I tell them, like, obviously we want to do this well. We want to be the best that we can be, but the end goal here is not for us to win golf tournaments. And Taylor University doesn't have a golf team just so we can win tournaments. We have a golf team because we believe that through this experience, each of our players can grow in their faith and figure out who God's calling them to be. And so to take a step back and look at each situation with that perspective, instead of just, how does this impact my team and our ability to play our best? Sometimes that's a challenge for me. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that would be hard to step away from that immediate win or loss, or, ranking, to go, wait a second, what's the like bigger picture here in God's view?
Yeah.
So to talk about just a little bit more, you were saying that your players at the beginning were really close to your age, but of course now, these college students are just getting younger and younger. Every time I see them, I'm like, who are these babies on this campus right now?
I get older every year, and they stay the same. So, the gap widens.
Yeah, so the gap widens. What is it like to, as a coach who does care about the team and the sport, but you're calling to lead them as believers and as people into their calling? How does that differ? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think I kind of look at it that, like, first of all, if they have if they've improved in the game of golf enough to play at the collegiate level, that's a passion that I think is God-given for them. And so I tell them, like, I want to be a good steward as your coach. I want to be a good steward of your passion, because I think that through that passion, God can teach you a lot if we're taking the proper perspective. And so when golf is just like a maddening game, and so there are great days and there are really hard days. And when it's as important as it is to my players, like, the bad days hurt. But I always feel like at that time, man, that's just a great opportunity for me to talk about broader perspective. Just this morning, I had one of my players who played in a tournament today, and she didn't play very well, and she was frustrated, and she texted me, and I tried to just, like, give a little perspective, and so I think that's a big part of it. And we're also trying to figure out how to live in a community as a team. And so part of what I'm doing sometimes is, hey, like, I know you felt like this decision was just about you and it was only going to impact you, but this decision impacted your teammates as well, and here's how.
Yeah.
And so once again, that's just perspective. And so I've just finished my 9th year, and I feel like with each year I get a little bit better at seeing the bigger picture, and I just have more stories to share of, like, I've seen this before, actually, and you remind me of this guy, and this is what happened. And so I'm always trying to do that. And I feel like that's the perspective, or that's the opportunity that God has given me to have such an influential part in their lives. As the coach of something that they care so deeply about, like, I've got a pretty prominent voice in their lives. And so the weight of that responsibility sometimes is really heavy. And sometimes I think, oh man, like, this moment could be a really pivotal moment in this young person's life. And so I'm thinking about a particular story a couple of years ago. I saw a player kind of have like a fit of rage. And he's a very calm, cool, and collected guy most of the time. And he didn't know that I could see it. And so I've got about like 100 yards to drive up to him. And the whole time I'm like, Lord, I need you to like put the words in my mouth. I don't know what I'm going to say to this guy, but what I'm about to say, I think it is something that he might remember for a really long time, and it has the potential to be really good or really bad.
Hmm.
And so I don't know, sometimes those moments are probably way bigger in my mind than they are to the kids I'm leading, but sometimes they aren't. I think sometimes they really are huge moments. So I try to just, um, say the right thing at the right time. Hope that God puts the right words in my mouth.
Yeah, so I'm like really curious. So what did you say?
Well, the first thing I said was, "Hey, you know that this is not acceptable behavior. You know our standards and our rules, and you know that this is not acceptable. And there are going to be consequences for these actions. I'm not ready. I don't even know what those are going to be at this point. I need time to think about that. But what I want you to do is you're not going to play the rest of the rounds. He had like 7 holes left. You're just going to walk with the other guys that you're playing. And I want you to think about like what's actually going on deeper inside that led you to get so frustrated that you would lash out like that, because it's not just golf.
Hmm.
And so what else is it, and how do we deal with that? um, and he did. And then I said, like, we're going to meet later this week, and I want to hear um, what what you think about all this. And he came back, and his best friend is also on the team. His best friend actually came to me about 2 months later, and he said, "Hey, coach, like that was that was a turning point for him."
Hmm.
Um, and I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, like we've had some really good conversations, and that was a turning point." And he had a phenomenal year that year. He won 2 tournaments for us. I mean, he was just a great player. And I think that was at the very beginning of the year. And so I think God really used that. And that story has been really powerful at other times when I've shared it with other players. Like, hey, you know, God's going to use this even when you screw up. If we can approach this the right way, like God can use this and help you grow through it. But we've got to deal with it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Wow. And I think God, like you, it's so cool that you were tuned into the Holy Spirit to know, like on your drive to that, like, okay, this is going to be a big moment, but I don't even know how it's going to play out yet, but I know it's important. And I think that's really cool. So you're
It's
right.
also worth noting. It's also worth noting that I think I've probably said the wrong thing in those moments just as often as I have maybe said the right thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that we all can share that sentiment for sure. Oh my goodness. Um, okay, so as a believer, I mean, you've already spoken to this quite a bit, but just faith and mentorship and leadership, they just really go hand in hand for you. Part of that is being at the university that you are in, where the university is saying
Right.
that the ultimate goal is, more relationship with Jesus. So I guess, how does that play out for you personally? How do you dive deep for yourself? Those kind of things.
Yeah. So I feel like in the last year or a couple of years, I feel like I've grown a lot as a leader because of like personal habits and really, I mean, basically just like spiritual disciplines. Um, and I just have found myself like those fruits of the spirit, patience and kindness and goodness, and all the things that you need if you're going to be an effective leader. Um, I don't have those unless I start my day the right way, and I have like my habits that I pretty much have to do. And so the times whenever I feel like, and I'm like, I didn't lead very well today, I can usually tie that back to some sort of lapse in my habits. And so I feel like I've grown in major ways there. Um, that the way I kind of look at that, one of the books that I read that was really impactful for me. It just kind of talked about your habits being like a lattice that, vines grow up, and
Mhm.
vines are what's going to be beautiful and blooming in your life, but the lattice is the framework that you've got to put in place.
Yeah.
And so for me, the habits are kind of that lattice for me in my life. Um, yeah, and I think at Taylor, um, I don't know the best way to say that, but there are times whenever we've got to fight a little bit of like some complacency. I think
Mm.
athletics is a great place to do it, because like there's a scoreboard, and so you're held accountable, to the results. And so sometimes it's like, hey, I know, you feel like that's okay, but quite frankly, like that wasn't good enough. Like
Mm.
your preparation wasn't good enough, your effort wasn't good enough, all of the things that are required of you, that it was not good enough. And you know, too often I think maybe we let those things slide. And if you're if you don't have a way to be held accountable, then that can be a problem. And so that's one of the things I feel like, we're trying to fight on a pretty regular basis with our student athletes at Taylor.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true a little bit in a lot of arenas, but I can see it for sure, in athletics and with that scoreboard. Uh, cool. Well, I'm like, oh, which one of my kids can I get to be a golfer so Kim can be their coach?
Yeah.
It's not going to work out. I can tell you already, it's not going to work out, but that's okay. So we've been talking about leadership in the sermon series over the past several weeks. And I'm just curious if anything has stuck out to you or has been beneficial or helped you think differently about leadership as you are a leader and you're listening to these messages about leadership.
Well, I thought the message um, that Matt preached this last weekend about, he talked about the man with the disability. And so Jesus goes to him, sees him on the Sabbath, and he kind of has those multiple options, knowing that the Pharisees are watching him. Um, and I had always thought, like Matt talked about, that Jesus kind of went into that like ready to pick a fight with the Pharisees, knowing that they were going to nitpick that, he was doing something on the Sabbath. But I loved Matt's perspective, and I thought it was a great lesson for me that like Jesus actually did this on the Sabbath in front of the Pharisees, perhaps because he saw the potential that they had if they could see the world through his eyes. And I just think a good leader like sees the best in people, sees their potential, even when they are adversarial. A leader says, "Man, if I could just turn that person, if I could help them see, then how powerful could they be for the mission?" And so I love that was the way Jesus was viewing that he actually did it in front of them for their benefit, even though it didn't work out that way.
Right.
And I feel like that's a lesson that, I can really put into practice. There are times whenever I just, you feel like a player, you're like, how many times do I have to tell you? How many times do we have to kind of have these same conversations? Um, and so you have the temptation is to be a little bit pessimistic about it. But if you can just see the best in people and see their potential, that's so powerful. And
Yeah.
it's powerful for them when they feel it from you, I think.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add to that, I think as a parent, that's so powerful too, to be able to see the potential in your kids. And, I think we start out wanting to always see the potential in them, and then they turn into teenagers, and then they get older, and then maybe you forget the potential that they once had. And so I love the idea that leaders are seeing potential in other people beyond what the other people can even see in themselves. That's a big part of the leadership, I guess, theory that I have as a leader, is really being like a potential seer.
Mhm.
So I loved that too. That's cool.
It's
Okay. Well,
amazing. Like I was thinking about, it's amazing. I mean, my kids are still little, so like everything that I say they don't always listen. But like, I mean, it still really matters. They haven't tuned me out yet. Um, and man, like I think about Nora, there are times whenever I just say, oh, no, you can do that. Come on, you can do that. And
Mhm.
she's just like, okay, I can. It's so amazing that, my perspective will change the way she sees things in a heartbeat. I know it won't always be that way, but it's fun right now while it is.
Yeah, and you think of all the people that have the reverse going on. A parent saying, "You can't do that. You're
Mm.
not enough to do that, or you're not smart enough to do that." And I just breaks your heart really, because as parents and as people who are speaking into the lives of kids, like to just keep that positive in front of them, that they can believe in themselves because you believe in them. And yeah, you're like you said, your voice matters so much in their lives, so
Mhm.
much. So you've got a lot of responsibility. Your life is full of impact with the people that you are surrounded with and that you've been blessed to lead. And so just glad and grateful that you're a part of our church family and that we can be supportive of you and encourage you in any way that we can. So it's pretty cool. Do you have anything else you want to say to anybody that is listening or watching?
Oh my gosh. You know, I, you always dream of this, right? Like, hey, just say whatever you want to everybody. But then when the time comes, you don't have anything to say.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
no, I will say this. Like, I've been part of Commonwealth for a long time, since the beginning. And there have been plenty of times when I feel like, my tank is empty. And being part of Common Way has just like filled up my tank and made it possible for me to go forward. And the other part of that is I come home and my kids who are down in Common Way Kids, like they just like they are listening, and it's having an impact. And like, you may think, all you volunteers down there, you think like just wrangling those 5-year-olds, all you're doing is like you're a circus, you're in the circus. But it has such an impact, and I hear the little things that you say to them like come out, and it like, oh, it almost like makes me cry. It's so awesome when that happens. So we
Yeah.
love Common Way, so thankful to be part of it.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that when people see you at Common Way, whenever we are all back together in church again, that maybe you will be a familiar face to some new people and that they can reach out to you. So thanks so much, Cameron.
Thanks, Jennifer.
All right.